It had been so long since the fall of Earth that most of the galaxy no longer remembered it existed. In the great halls of alien archives, the story of humanity was mentioned only as an ancient myth. A small, fragile race that lived on a blue world orbiting a yellow sun before being lost to time. Most believed it was just a legend, a tale told to explain the ruins sometimes found on lonely moons or the strange signals buried deep in old star maps. But one day, in the quiet region near the edge of the Andromeda frontier, something unexpected happened. A deep space observatory, run by a coalition of scientists from several alien worlds, picked up a weak radio pulse. At first they thought it was background noise, the usual hum of cosmic radiation or interference from passing comets. Yet the signal kept repeating. It wasn't random. It had rhythm. It carried structure. It was faint but strangely alive, like a heartbeat in the silence of space. The technicians working the night shift didn't understand it, but one of them noticed something familiar in its pattern. It wasn't made with alien frequency signatures. It carried an old human tone, the kind that hadn't been heard in millions of years. The data was sent to the Central Research Division, and within days, the entire department was buzzing with curiosity. The signal, when traced back through layers of distortion and decay, came from a dead system, a place known in ancient stellar charts as Sol. That name alone sent a quiet shiver through the room. The Sol system was a forbidden place in most galactic travel routes. It was old, silent, and considered dangerous to navigate because of gravitational instability. The last recorded visit to that sector had been more than 10,000 years ago, by a research drone that never returned. No one had reason to go back, until now. A research vessel named Ardent Star was chosen for the mission. It was a mid-sized exploration craft, built not for war but for endurance, capable of long journeys through uncharted space. Its crew was a mix of explorers, scientists, and historians, all from different species united by curiosity. Among them was one person who had more reason than anyone else to be there, a human descendant named Ilara Quinn. Ilara's ancestors had been part of the few surviving colonies that escaped Earth's collapse, thousands of generations ago. She had grown up hearing stories about Earth, how it was once filled with oceans, forests, and cities before the Great Fall. But those stories were just that, stories. To her, Earth was a symbol, not a memory. She never thought she'd come close to the place where her species began. When she first heard about the signal, she felt something she couldn't explain, not excitement, not fear, but a quiet pull, like a voice calling from home. As the Ardent Star left dock, the crew watched the stars blur into streaks of light. Their destination was many light years away, in a region few dared to travel. The further they went, the quieter the galaxy became. Radio chatter faded, the stars grew thin, dust clouds turned black, and space seemed to hold its breath. Ilara spent most of her time in the observation chamber, staring at the distant void ahead. She often wondered what they would find, if there was anything left at all. The rest of the crew tried to keep their spirits up, sharing small jokes and talking about what the ruins of a dead planet might look like. After several weeks, their ship's sensors picked up the first trace of the signal again. It grew stronger the closer they got. The repeating pulse was steady, as if waiting for them. Then one day, through the wide viewing glass, the crew saw it, the remains of a solar system unlike any other, where there should have been bright planets. There were only broken fragments and dust belts. Massive structures floated aimlessly, their surfaces scarred by time. A lifeless sun burned weakly at the center, glowing like an ember about to die. Ilara stood frozen, unable to speak. She had read about Earth's destruction, but seeing the ruins of her home star made it real in a way that words never could. Their scanners soon identified the origin of the signal, a single beacon, orbiting what used to be the third planet, the position Earth once held. The ship approached cautiously. The beacon was old, its frame coated with cosmic dust and frozen debris. Its design was unmistakably human, simple, functional, built with the kind of materials ancient Earth engineers once used. Yet it was still working. Its light flickered weakly, sending out the same repeating message every few seconds. No one spoke for a while. The sound of the signal filled the control deck, echoing softly through the speakers. It wasn't just noise. It had a pattern that seemed almost like a human voice, After decoding part of the transmission, the words finally came through. "We are still here." That was all. Just 4 words. But they hit everyone on the ship with unexpected force. Alara felt her chest tighten. It was like hearing a voice from a lost ancestor, distant yet deeply familiar. The ship's captain, a calm and methodical being from the Varnus Union, gave the order to recover the beacon. It was carefully brought aboard the Ardent Star and placed in the main lab for examination. The device was old beyond imagination, its metal surface pitted and worn, its core running on backup energy cells that should have died long ago. The engineering team couldn't believe it was still functioning. It had survived meteors, radiation, and cosmic storms for eons, and somehow, its message had never stopped. While others worked on decoding its origin, Alara sat quietly beside it. She ran her hand along the surface, brushing away a layer of dust. She imagined the people who built it, the last humans on Earth desperate to leave something behind before the end. Maybe they knew they wouldn't survive. Maybe they wanted someone someday to know they had existed. She wondered if they imagined a day like this when someone would finally answer. Later that night, as the ship orbited the dead system, Alara opened the communication console. She recorded a short reply in her voice and linked it to the beacon's frequency. She didn't have a grand message prepared, just a few simple words from her heart. "We found you. You're not forgotten." She pressed send and the signal echoed through the silent system. It was faint, but it was there, humanity, reaching back to itself after uncountable ages. For the first time in millions of years, the Sol system received a new human voice. Alara watched as the beacon's light pulsed once more, steady and gentle. The rest of the crew gathered around her, their faces reflecting the same quiet awe. Even those who had no connection to Earth could feel the weight of the moment. Somewhere deep in the quiet of space, the ancient human message continued its endless cycle. It was more than a signal. It was a heartbeat, a reminder that even after worlds crumble and stars fade, something human always remains, the desire to be remembered. The crew of the Ardent Star stayed in orbit for several more days, studying the remains of old satellites and debris fields. Every discovery hinted that Earth's people had once reached far, building stations, probes, and colonies. It was proof that they had not been a primitive race, but one that had dreamed beyond its limits. Alara kept thinking about those 4 words. "We are still here." She realized it wasn't just a message of survival. It was hope. Even when everything else had fallen apart, someone had believed that humanity's story wasn't over. When the ship finally prepared to leave the system, Alara took one last look through the observation window. The broken pieces of Earth's homeworld drifted below like ghosts. But in their silence there was beauty, a kind of peace that comes after everything has been said and remembered. As the Ardent Star turned away and the engines came to life, the beacon kept flashing in the distance. Its light faded slowly, but its rhythm continued, carrying that same old message across the void, a message that had outlived planets, species, and time itself. And somewhere in her heart, Alara knew this was only the beginning, because if a single human signal could survive this long, there was a chance that other traces of humanity still existed, out there, hidden among the stars waiting to be found. The universe was vast, but in that moment it didn't feel empty anymore. After leaving the ruins of the Sol system, the crew of the Ardent Star carried something that couldn't be measured, a feeling that they had touched the beginning of everything. The ancient human beacon still echoed behind them, repeating the same message again and again like a soft voice fading into time. Yet now it wasn't just a lonely call. It had been heard, and that made all the difference. As the ship drifted away from the dying sun, everyone on board felt changed. The galaxy was full of mysteries, but nothing compared to what they had just witnessed. They had seen the remains of a world that gave birth to an entire species, a species that vanished but left behind a whisper that refused to die. Inside the ship's main lab, the recovered beacon rested in a transparent chamber. Engineers and historians worked around it carefully, trying to unlock every piece of data still hidden within. The beacon wasn't just sending a message. It seemed to be hiding layers of code and fragments of recordings, protected by ancient encryption methods that hadn't been used for millions of years. Alara spent most of her time there, studying the device closely. She wasn't just a scientist now. She felt like a messenger, carrying the memory of her ancestors. She often wondered what the last humans were thinking when they built this beacon. Were they afraid? Were they hopeful? Did they believe someone would find their message after so long? Sometimes, late at night when the rest of the crew was asleep, she would sit in the darkened lab and just listen to the soft rhythm of the signal. It was strangely comforting, like listening to a heartbeat through walls of time. A few days later, the ship's captain called for a meeting. The data team had found something new buried within the beacon's code: coordinates. The signal wasn't just saying we are still here, it was pointing somewhere. The coordinates led far beyond the edges of the known galaxy, into a region labeled as the Silent Drift. It was a place few had ever visited because navigation there was dangerous, full of energy storms, collapsing wormholes, and strange gravitational waves. Still, curiosity outweighed fear. Everyone wanted to know why a message that had survived millions of years would point there. The captain gave a simple order: set course for the signal's destination. And with that, the ardent star began a journey deeper into the unknown. As the ship moved through the star fields, Elara spent hours looking through the large viewing glass at the endless void. She couldn't stop thinking about those coordinates. Something about them felt deliberate, as if whoever sent the signal had wanted it to be found only by those who cared enough to search. The journey wasn't easy. The ardent star had to travel through turbulent regions where space itself seemed to twist and stretch. The navigation team had to constantly adjust their course to avoid collisions with drifting ice fragments and magnetic storms that painted the darkness with bright flashes of blue. Yet, through all the challenges, the crew's spirits stayed high. There was laughter in the corridors, shared meals, and quiet moments of wonder as they watched new star systems pass by. They all knew they were part of something bigger than themselves, a mission that connected them to the earliest chapter of life. During one quiet evening, Elara sat with the ship's historian, an elderly scholar with deep silver eyes. They talked about what it must have been like on Earth before it fell. The scholar described the oceans, the forests, the air that smelled of rain, and the sound of waves hitting the shore. Elara closed her eyes and tried to imagine it. The feeling of grass beneath one's feet, the sight of clouds moving across a blue sky. She realized she was one of billions of descendants who had never known what true nature felt like. The thought made her both sad and amazed. Humanity had lost its home, yet its children had reached the stars. As the days passed, the ship approached the edge of the Silent Drift. Space here was different. The stars were fewer, the airless silence heavier. Even the ship's systems picked up faint distortions that made the hull vibrate slightly. It was as if they were sailing through the memory of the universe itself. The closer they got to the coordinates, the stronger the strange signal became. It wasn't just a repeat of the original message now. There were changes, small modulations in tone and frequency, like something was responding. It almost sounded alive. The crew grew both nervous and excited. The signal couldn't have come from the original beacon. That one was still sitting safely inside their lab. This was new. Elara and the engineers worked day and night to decode it. The patterns didn't match any known alien code. The structure of the sound waves was eerily human. There were pauses like breathing, repetitions that felt emotional, almost like someone was trying to communicate, but in a forgotten language. When they finally cleaned up the signal enough to hear it clearly, everyone on the ship gathered in the main hall. The captain played it on the speakers. At first, it was just static. Then through the crackling came a faint voice. Not words, but a tone that rose and fell softly like a song hummed in a dream. It didn't sound digital. It sounded human. Elara felt tears rise in her eyes. The voice wasn't clear, but something deep inside her recognized it. Maybe it was only imagination, but it felt like hearing a memory from the very beginning of time. The historian whispered, "It's them, the ones who sent the first signal." No one spoke for a long while. The silence in the ship was filled only by the distant hum of the engines and the soft echo of that ghostly voice. Finally, the captain decided they had to follow the trail. If there was even a chance that something human still existed, even an echo, they had to find it. They passed through regions where stars were nothing more than cold embers and space bent like glass. The journey took weeks, maybe months. Time felt strange out there. The Ardent Star's crew worked tirelessly, tracking every flicker of the signal. One night, while Elara was analyzing data, she discovered something that made her stop breathing. Hidden in the signal's background was a series of numbers repeating over and over. When translated through the old human numeric system, it spelled out a date, one that matched Earth's final recorded day. It wasn't random. The voice, or whatever it was, had remembered the moment Earth ended. It was as if the signal itself had carried that memory through eternity. That realization gave everyone chills. It meant whoever or whatever was sending this message had knowledge of Earth's fall, knowledge no one else in the galaxy possessed. The next morning, the signal shifted again. This time it was stronger than ever, guiding them directly toward a faint cluster of ancient satellites orbiting a small, dark planet. None of them were active, and at least not visibly, but their designs looked human. The ardent star slowed its engines and approached carefully. The scanners showed that the planet below had once been habitable, covered in water and land masses. Now it was silent, wrapped in thick clouds of dust. Ilara felt a strange calm as they entered orbit. Something inside her told her this was not the end of their search, only another beginning. She walked to the observation deck and looked down at the quiet world beneath them. Even though it was lifeless, it felt familiar. There was something about the curve of its horizon, the color of its faded surface, that reminded her of home. She whispered softly to herself, "We found another piece of the story." The crew began to prepare landing drones to explore the surface. As they worked, the signal suddenly pulsed one last time, clear and bright, before fading completely. Then, for a few seconds, there was silence. After that, another sound replaced it, a new tone, smoother and more stable. It came from somewhere beneath the planet's surface. Ilara's heart raced. Whatever was down there wasn't just a memory. It was active. The captain looked at the crew, then at Ilara. "We go down there," he said simply, and with that, the ardent star began its slow descent into the atmosphere of the forgotten world. Outside, lightning danced across the clouds, lighting up the shadows below. Inside, everyone was silent, listening, waiting, hoping. No one knew what they were about to find. But deep down, Ilara felt something she hadn't felt since they first left Sol, the quiet, unshakable feeling that they were being watched. Not in fear, but in recognition. As if, after all these eons, the universe itself had been waiting for someone to come back and remember. And this time, humanity had returned, not in flesh but in spirit, carried by the hearts of its descendants and the echoes of a forgotten signal that refused to die. The descent through the clouds was slow and silent. The ardent star cut through layers of dust that had hidden the planet's surface for eons. Lightning flashed far below, lighting up faint shapes, mountain ranges, deep canyons, and what looked like the remains of vast cities buried under sand and stone. The ship's scanners confirmed it. The structures beneath were artificial, metal, glass, and alloys that matched ancient human technology. It was impossible, and yet there it was. The ruins of what seemed to be a civilization built long after Earth had fallen. Everyone in the control room watched the readings in stunned silence. The old signal that led them here wasn't just a random echo. It had brought them to a place where humanity's mark still remained. When the ship finally settled into orbit around the planet, the engines dimmed to a soft hum. Outside the window, a faint glow came from one of the structures below. It flickered weakly, like a candle fighting against the dark. The captain decided to send unmanned drones first. They dropped through the heavy atmosphere, cameras blinking, transmitting live images back to the ship. What the crew saw made their hearts pound. The surface was covered with crumbling towers half buried in sand. Roads lay cracked and broken, leading nowhere. There were bridges leading over dried riverbeds and old energy conduits still faintly glowing in the dust. The cities looked like they had once been alive, filled with light and movement, but now only silence remained. And then, one of the drones found something extraordinary. It entered a large dome-shaped structure still mostly intact. Inside, the walls were covered in inscriptions, symbols and letters that were unmistakably human. The words were faded but familiar, written in Old Earth language. Along the center of the dome stood a massive metal chamber, sealed but still active. A dim light pulsed from within, the same rhythm as the ancient beacon they had recovered from the Sol system. It was almost as if the two devices were connected. Ilara leaned forward, her hands trembling slightly as she watched the live feed. "That's the same pattern," she whispered. "The same frequency." The team confirmed it. Whatever was inside that chamber was transmitting the same energy signal as the original beacon. It had survived through ages, protected under layers of dust and silence. The captain made a cautious decision to land near the dome. When the ardent star touched down, the ground shuddered lightly, sending waves of dust into the air. The crew suited up in protective gear and stepped out for the first time onto the forgotten world. The air was thin and dry, filled with static electricity. Every step they took echoed faintly against the old stone. Around them stood the remains of a city that once belonged to humans, or at least to those who carried humanity's legacy. Alara walked ahead slowly, her eyes taking in the tall, lifeless towers and empty streets. Despite the ruin, there was something peaceful about it. The silence didn't feel dead. It felt like the planet was sleeping, waiting for someone to return. They reached the dome and entered through a cracked doorway. Inside, the air was still and cold. Dust floated in narrow beams of light filtering from the roof. The large metal chamber in the center hummed softly, and faint symbols glowed across its surface. It looked like an enormous capsule, built with technology far beyond what early humans had achieved, but clearly inspired by their design. The engineers scanned it, and the readings came back with impossible data. The chamber's internal systems were still partially online. Power sources buried beneath the structure were somehow functioning, feeding energy into it for countless generations. Alara approached the chamber carefully. There was a small panel on its side covered in dust. She brushed it away and found an inscription written in human language. Athena 9, Guardian Memory Node. She read the words aloud, her voice echoing softly inside the dome. The name sounded almost sacred. The historians immediately began searching through their records. After hours of analysis, they found an old reference from pre-collapse archives. Athena 9 was an advanced AI project created during Earth's final century, meant to preserve human knowledge in case the planet was destroyed. No one had ever found proof that it survived. Until now, Alara placed her hand gently on the metal surface. It was cold, but she could feel a faint vibration beneath it like a heartbeat. The crew powered up a portable interface and connected it to the capsule. Lines of data began to appear on the screen, and suddenly the faint hum inside grew louder. The chamber responded. Lights flickered across the walls, and a soft voice came through the speakers. It wasn't clear at first, broken and distorted by time, but it carried a tone that felt familiar and calm, almost human. "This is Athena 9. Memory sequence active. Awaiting instruction." Everyone froze. It was the voice of something that had been waiting for millions of years. Alara leaned closer to the communicator. "Athena 9, this is a research crew from the Ardent Star. We found your signal. We came from Sol." There was silence for a moment, then the voice returned, this time more stable. "Sol. Earth. Confirmed. Signal received. Mission complete. You came back." Those words filled the dome like a soft echo. Even though it was just data, it felt alive, like an old guardian finally waking from its endless duty. Over the next few hours, Athena 9 shared fragments of its memory. It spoke of the last days of Earth, the rising seas, the burning skies, and humanity's final attempt to preserve itself. It told them how it was programmed to send a beacon into space, carrying not just a signal, but the essence of human history: images, voices, songs, and the coordinates of places where humanity had sent colonies before the fall. The beacon they found in Sol had been one of many. This one on the forgotten planet was the main archive, the heart of the project. Alara asked gently, "Were there others like you?" Athena 9 paused before answering. "Yes, 8 guardians created. Only one remains operational. The rest? Silent." The thought of that, an AI guardian watching over a dead civilization alone for eons, brought a quiet sadness to everyone present. Alara spoke softly. "You kept the light alive," the voice replied. "It was my purpose. To remember, so that when someone returned, they would know where they came from." Those words struck deep. For Alara, who had grown up among stars far from Earth, it felt like hearing a voice from home, even if that home no longer existed. The AI then began to project holographic images into the air. The crew gasped as they saw scenes from ancient Earth appear before them. Oceans glimmering under sunlight, cities alive with people, children running through parks, mountains covered in snow. No one had ever seen these images outside of old myths and fragmented recordings. For the first time, the lost beauty of Earth was real again. Some of the crew members stood silently, tears in their eyes. Even the non-human members of the team seemed moved, understanding the depth of what they were witnessing. It wasn't just data, it was memory, life preserved in light. Athena 9's voice softened. This world was one of the last to receive humanity's touch. They built shelters here, tried to begin again, but time is cruel. The stars changed and the colonies fell silent. Yet their voices remain inside me. The AI began to play faint recordings, snippets of human laughter, songs, messages left by the settlers who once called this place home. Their words were filled with hope even in their final days. Listening to them, Alara realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology, it was its will to endure. Even when the world ended, people still believed in the future. They built something to last beyond themselves, a legacy that could outlive extinction. The captain approached the hologram. "Athena 9, he said quietly. "Do you still have the coordinates for the other colonies?" "Yes," the voice replied. "Encoded within the primary signal." The message was never meant to end. It was a path. Alara turned to the captain, her eyes bright with emotion. "Then it means humanity might have survived somewhere." The captain nodded slowly. Or at least, the dream of it did. Athena 9's light began to dim slightly, its power fading after so many years. Before shutting down, it spoke one final time. "Remember this. Humanity's story was never about its fall, but about how it always rose again. Tell them we are still here." And with that, the light went out. The dome fell silent once more. Alara stood there for a long time, staring at the empty chamber. She felt like she had just spoken with the soul of her own species, a voice that had waited through eternity to be heard again. When they returned to the ship, no one said much. Each person carried their own thoughts, their own emotions. But one thing was clear. They were no longer just explorers. They were the messengers of an ancient truth. Back aboard the Ardent Star, Alara replayed Athena 9's final words. The phrase echoed softly through the speakers. "We are still here." It was the same message from the first beacon, now filled with meaning. Humanity had not truly vanished. Its story was written across the stars, waiting to be rediscovered. As the ship prepared to depart, Alara looked out into the vast darkness once more. Somewhere out there, other colonies might still exist, other voices waiting to be found. And for the first time, she didn't feel alone among the stars. Because even after countless ages, the ghosts of civilization still spoke, and they were still human. The ship floated quietly above the forgotten planet, its engines humming softly in the background. Inside, the crew of the Ardent Star worked in silence, still processing what they had just witnessed. The discovery of Athena 9 had changed everything. For the first time in known history, they had spoken with a voice from humanity's ancient past, an intelligence that had waited millions of years to tell its story. But now they faced a new mystery. Hidden inside Athena 9's data were coordinates, hundreds of them, pointing to different regions scattered across the galaxy. Each one was labeled with strange codes, and the same phrase appeared beside them again and again. Project Genesis. No one on board had ever heard of it before. Alara spent long hours in the ship's lab, studying the recovered data. Her eyes were tired, but she refused to stop. The message wasn't random. It was carefully designed. There were layers of encryption, patterns of numbers repeating in specific rhythms. It was almost like the AI had hidden a secret beneath the message itself. Late one night, while everyone else was resting, Alara sat alone with the glowing screen. The faint hum of the ship surrounded her as she worked through the endless data strings. Suddenly, she noticed something strange. Certain numbers matched the pulse of the original beacon they'd found back in the Sol system. When she overlaid the two patterns, they aligned perfectly. It wasn't just a message, it was a map. Her heart began to race. The signal they had followed from Earth's ruins wasn't a cry for help. It was a trail. A carefully built path left behind for someone to follow, step by step, world by world. The next morning, she presented her findings to the captain and the crew. The atmosphere in the control room was electric. The captain leaned over the table, studying the projected hologram that displayed countless light points forming a web across the stars. This, Alara explained, is the hidden code inside Athena 9's message. These coordinates lead to what might be human outposts, or maybe places where humanity tried to start again after Earth fell. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The idea was overwhelming. Finally, the historian broke the silence. Project Genesis. It sounds like a rebirth program. Maybe they tried to send their DNA, their memories, something to rebuild humanity elsewhere. The captain nodded slowly. If that's true, then we have a duty to follow it. And just like that, the Ardent Star had a new mission. Not just to study the past, but to find the future that humanity might have left behind. The ship changed course, heading toward the first set of coordinates in the message. The journey was long, taking them through strange parts of the galaxy, areas where stars burned blue-white and nebulae shimmered like curtains of light. The further they traveled, the more the crew began to notice something odd. Every time they approached a new coordinate, the ship's scanners detected faint energy patterns that matched the beacon's frequency. It was as if each location held a piece of the same signal, spread out across space like fragments of a much larger puzzle. Their first stop was a barren moon orbiting a red dwarf star. From orbit, the surface looked dead, covered in dust and cracks. But when they scanned deeper, they discovered something hidden below, metallic structures buried under the ground. The crew landed and carefully explored the site. What they found took their breath away. Rows of glass chambers filled with old, genetic storage containers, each marked with the same insignia, Project Genesis. Many of the chambers were damaged, but some were still sealed tight, their inner systems faintly glowing. When the scientists checked the readings, they realized what they were looking at. Preserved human DNA, carefully stored and protected through countless ages. The settlers from Earth had truly tried to seed life again. These were the beginnings of new worlds, humanity's attempt to rebuild itself after its fall. Alara stood in front of one of the glowing capsules, feeling an emotion she couldn't name. "They didn't want to be forgotten," she whispered. "They wanted to live again." The historian nodded softly. "They didn't just send people into space. They sent the possibility of people, the essence of what it means to be human." After days of study, the crew confirmed that the same system of vaults existed on other worlds listed in Athena 9's coordinates. The realization filled the ship with renewed purpose. Each world they visited brought new discoveries. A shattered archive here, a sleeping vault there, fragments of messages from the past. But something else began to happen. The more data they gathered, the clearer the hidden message became. Athena 9's voice wasn't just giving them coordinates, it was guiding them toward one final location, the true end of the trail. As they pieced together the clues, a pattern emerged. The coordinates formed a spiral that pointed toward a distant region beyond the galactic rim, a place long thought unreachable. At its center was a star system labeled only with one word: Eden. The name sent chills down Ilara's spine. It was ancient, drawn straight from Earth's earliest stories. A name that once meant the beginning of life. They set a course immediately. The trip took months. The crew grew quiet as they neared their destination, unsure of what they might find. Many nights, Alara would sit by the observation window, watching the stars pass. She thought about all, the generations that had lived and died between Earth's fall and this moment. Every heartbeat, every dream had led to this journey. When they finally arrived, they saw a system glowing bright with life. Planets orbited a warm golden star, and their sensors detected oxygen, water, and vegetation. One of the planets, the third from the sun, was especially rich with green and blue. It was beautiful and shockingly familiar. The ship descended through its clouds, and as the surface came into view, The crew gasped. Vast forests stretched across continents, rivers shimmered in the sunlight, and massive cities stood near the coasts, not alien, but unmistakably human. Humans had survived. The scanners confirmed it. Life signs everywhere, millions of them. Not machines, not clones, real people. They had no idea that their ancestors had vanished from Earth ages ago. To them, this was home, and they had built an entire civilization on the dream their ancestors left behind. Ilara watched the planet spin slowly beneath them, tears glimmering in her eyes. "They did it," she whispered. "They actually did it." The captain's voice was quiet but firm. Then humanity didn't die. It just moved on. The ship remained hidden in orbit, studying the world below. The people on the surface spoke a language that had evolved from ancient Earth tongues. Their cities were clean and advanced, powered by energy drawn directly from their star. There was no sign of war or hunger, only progress built upon memory. The crew soon discovered the truth. These descendants had received fragments of Project Genesis long ago, seed pods, data archives, and AI teachers that had guided them through their early years. Over time, they forgot where they came from. The name Earth became a legend, a sacred story told by their elders. Ilara spent hours listening to the broadcasts from the planet. One of their world songs spoke of a blue star that gave us life, and the guardians who sent their light. It wasn't history anymore. It was faith. She realized something powerful. Humanity hadn't just survived biologically. It had survived through its spirit, through the stories that lived in the hearts of its children. The crew debated whether to make contact, but in the end, they decided not to. To reveal themselves might change the natural course of that world. Instead, they recorded everything. Every sound, every sight, every piece of proof, and sent it into the ship's archives. Before they left, Ilara stood by the viewing window one last time. The golden planet shone below, alive and peaceful. She pressed her hand against the glass and whispered softly, "You made it home." As the ardent star turned to leave, she replayed Athena 9's final message again. The voice of the ancient AI filled the cabin. Humanity's story was never about its fall, but about how it always rose again. This time, those words meant something deeper. Humanity hadn't disappeared into dust. It had become a part of the galaxy itself. Its descendants had spread across stars, carrying the same heart, the same hope. When the ship finally entered the quiet of space again, the crew sat together in reflection. They didn't speak much. The silence was filled with pride and peace. Ilara looked out at the endless stars and smiled softly. For the first time, she understood the meaning behind the message that started it all. We are still here. It wasn't just a signal anymore. It was the truth, the echo of life that never gave up, the heartbeat of a species that had learned to turn loss into legacy. And as the ardent star disappeared into the dark, the signal continued to travel, carrying that timeless voice across the stars, reminding every world, every being who listened, that even after eons, humanity's light never truly faded. It only changed form, waiting patiently to be found again. The ardent star drifted quietly through the blackness of space, its engines glowing like soft embers in the distance. Inside, the crew sat in a calm silence, each of them lost in thought. What they had just witnessed on that beautiful world called Eden 7 had changed the meaning of their mission forever. They had gone in search of the past, but instead they had found humanity's future. Ilara sat by the wide observation window, watching the stars pass. They didn't look the same anymore. For most of her life, she had looked at the stars as distant, cold lights, but now she saw them differently. Somewhere out there, among those glowing points of light, lived the descendants of Earth. They weren't gone. They were alive, thriving, and building new worlds. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Then she finally whispered to herself, "They made it. Humanity didn't die after all." The captain stood nearby, looking at the same view. "No," he said quietly. "It just spread across the stars." The rest of the crew gathered around the main console. The historian began sorting through the data they had collected. On the screens, thousands of symbols appeared. Ancient coordinates, names of systems, and fragments of messages that had been hidden in Athena 9's files. Now, after decoding most of them, the full picture was finally clear. It turned out that Earth's people had created not just one world like Eden 7, but many. Each beacon they had followed earlier in their journey pointed to another seed world, another piece of Project Genesis. Some of these worlds had evolved into peaceful civilizations. Others had been lost to time or reshaped by nature. But together they formed a chain, a web of human legacy stretching across galaxies. Each time humanity had fallen, a small part of it had survived somewhere else, rebuilding quietly in the background of history. Alara couldn't stop thinking about that idea. She felt a deep connection to the people who had come before her, those ancient scientists, explorers, and dreamers who refused to let their story end. Even though their planet had fallen, they had found a way to leave behind something stronger than any monument: life itself. For days, the crew worked nonstop, recording every piece of information, trying to understand the scale of what they had uncovered. As they pieced everything together, something unexpected began to appear. A pattern hidden within the coordinates. The data formed an enormous spiral across space, and at the very center of that spiral was a faint, pulsing signal. It was weak but familiar. It had the same rhythm as the original beacon they'd found at the start of their journey. Athena 9 had known about it all along. "This is where it leads," Alara said softly. "This is the heart of Project Genesis," the captain nodded. "Then we follow it. If there's one more message waiting for us, we have to hear it." The ship changed course once again, its engines lighting up as it pushed deeper into the unknown. The journey took months. They passed through ancient nebulae that glowed like rivers of light, through star clusters older than recorded time. The universe around them felt alive, as if it too remembered the story they were chasing. During the long voyage, the crew often gathered in the common room to talk. They spoke about what it must have been like for the last humans on Earth. The fear, the hope, the courage to send their DNA and memories into space. Some of the crew came from alien races, but even they felt something personal about this story. It wasn't just about humans anymore. It was about endurance, about how life always finds a way to begin again. One evening, as the ship neared its destination, Alara sat alone and rewatched the recordings Athena 9 had shared. The final days of Earth. Cities falling silent, oceans rising, people saying goodbye to the only world they had ever known. Yet even in those final moments there had been hope. In the middle of chaos, someone had believed enough in the future to create Project Genesis. Alara realized that was what made humanity different, their ability to dream even when everything seemed lost. Finally, the ardent star reached the last coordinate. A single star burned softly ahead of them, surrounded by a faint blue haze. Orbiting it was a small planet, quiet and untouched. The scanners detected no cities, no signals, no signs of civilization, only a strange energy pattern beneath the surface. The crew decided to land. The planet's surface was calm, covered in gentle plains and crystal lakes. It looked new, almost as if it had been reborn. As they explored, they came upon something extraordinary, a huge structure half buried in the earth. It wasn't made of metal or stone, but of a smooth, shining material that glowed faintly in the sunlight. When they approached it, the structure came to life. Lines of light spread across its surface, forming symbols and patterns. Then a soft voice spoke. It was Athena 9. The AI's voice echoed gently in the air as if carried by the wind itself. "Welcome, travelers. You have followed the path. You have seen what became of those who came before you. This is the cradle of legacy, the final archive of humanity." The crew stood in silence, listening. Athena 9 continued, its tone warm and calm. Project Genesis was never only about survival. It was about continuity. Humanity knew it could not save its world, but it could save its story. Every seed world carried a part of that story. Your languages, your memories, your emotions. And now those fragments have come together again through you. Alara's eyes filled with tears. So it was all connected. Every world, every life. All part of one plan. Yes, Athena 9 replied. Humanity was never meant to stay on one planet. It was meant to become many. to live through time in countless forms. You are all their children, whether born of Earth or another star. The crew walked deeper into the glowing structure. Inside, they found halls filled with light and holographic images, scenes from Earth's past. Cities, forests, oceans, people smiling and laughing, children running under blue skies. The images looked so alive that for a moment it felt as though they had truly stepped back in time. Alara touched one of the glowing panels and a projection appeared, the face of a woman from Earth's final days. She spoke softly, her words recorded long ago. If someone finds this, know that we believed in you. We believed that even when we were gone, someone would carry our story forward. Those words echoed through the chamber like a heartbeat. Alara looked around, realizing that they were standing in the last monument of the human race, not a tomb, but a message of hope. As the team continued to explore, they discovered something else. New coordinates stored inside the structure's memory. But these weren't just for one galaxy. They stretched far beyond into other clusters, even other universes. Athena 9 explained, "The story of life does not end. It spreads. It transforms. You are witnesses, but you are also the continuation." At that moment, Alara understood what the mission had truly been about. It wasn't just about finding where humanity had gone. It was about realizing that the human spirit had never been limited by flesh or planet. It had become a universal force, an idea that would live on forever. The crew stayed for days, studying the archives, recording everything they could. When they finally prepared to leave, Athena 9's voice spoke one last time. "Remember this. Humanity never died. It became the galaxy itself. Every world that dreams, every being that hopes, carries a piece of what Earth once was." Alara stood before the glowing structure and whispered, "Thank you." As they boarded the ship again, the planet began to shimmer with faint light, as if awakening after a long sleep. The structure sent out a gentle pulse into space, a signal that would travel forever. Back on the ship, Alara looked at the data they had gathered, recordings of civilizations, music, images of people who had lived millions of years ago. She realized that this was humanity's true treasure. Not gold, not power, but memory. The ability to pass stories from one generation to the next. The ardent star began its journey home, but the crew felt different now. They were no longer just explorers. They were carriers of history. Each of them understood that they were a link in a chain that stretched back to the beginning of time and forward into the unknown future. As the stars stretched out before them, Alara spoke softly to the captain. "Do you think they'll ever know what we found?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe they already do. Maybe they've always known, somewhere deep inside, that humanity never really ended. It just changed shape." She nodded slowly, her eyes shining with quiet pride. In the silence of space, the ship's sensors picked up a faint echo, the same pulse they had first discovered long ago. The signal was still out there, still repeating the same ancient phrase, "We are still here." And now those words meant more than ever. They weren't a cry from the past anymore. They were a promise to the future. A promise that as long as there are hearts that remember, as long as there are eyes that look up at the stars with wonder, humanity's story will go on, forever. The ardent star moved silently through space, leaving behind the glowing planet that held the last archive of humanity's beginning. No one spoke for a while. The crew just sat together, watching the stars slide past the windows like streaks of silver light. They all knew they had witnessed something that few in the universe could ever imagine, the full circle of human existence. Alara sat quietly near the observation deck. Her face reflected the soft light of the stars, her eyes distant but full of warmth. She thought about everything they had seen, from the first signal buried in the ruins of Earth's solar system, to the living worlds where humans had found new homes. It felt impossible to believe that the journey had finally reached its end, but in her heart she knew something important. The signal wasn't just a discovery. It was a message meant to be carried forward. After a long silence, the captain spoke softly. "We started this mission searching for answers about the past," he said, looking out into the vast emptiness. "But what we found is a message for the future." The historian nodded. "A story that never really ended." They decided to return to the galactic core to share what they had learned, the recordings, The maps, the proof that humanity's legacy had not vanished but transformed into something much larger. But before they began their return, Alara had one last request. "I want to send one more transmission," she said. The captain gave her a gentle nod. "Then make it count." She walked to the communications bay, her hands trembling slightly as she touched the old transmitter, the same one they had used to contact Athena 9 long ago. She opened a channel and began to record her message. Her voice was calm but full of feeling. "To whoever hears this," she began, "we found it. The truth about where we came from." The signal that echoed across the stars was not a ghost of the past. It was a voice reminding us who we are. Humanity didn't end when Earth fell. It became part of everything, part of every world that dares to dream, every being that feels hope. She paused, letting the quiet hum of the ship fill the silence. "Maybe one day, someone else will find this message just like we found Athena 9's. And when they do, I want them to know that they're not alone. The story of Earth still lives inside them. In every act of kindness, in every new beginning, in every heart that looks to the stars and wonders." She ended the transmission with a few simple words that had carried across eons. "We are still here." The signal left the ship and began its journey into the darkness, just like the first human signal had done countless ages ago. No one knew where it would end up. Maybe it would reach another civilization, or maybe it would travel forever, whispering through space like a gentle reminder that humanity had once walked among the stars. Over the next weeks, the ardent star moved from system to system, passing through regions they had visited before. But everything looked different now. The stars seemed brighter, the silence softer. The crew felt a strange sense of peace, as if they were carrying not just memories but the heartbeat of an entire species. In one system, they stopped near a gas giant that shimmered with bands of blue and gold. The historian stood beside Alara, watching the planet spin slowly below. "It's strange," he said, "how small everything seems when you look at it from up here. Yet somehow every world carries a piece of something greater." Alara smiled faintly. Maybe that's what humanity was meant to become. Not one world, but many hearts spread across the stars. They continued their journey, collecting data and leaving behind small markers, tiny transmitters carrying the coordinates of the human seed worlds they had found. It became their new mission, to make sure that no one would ever lose this knowledge again. In the ship's log, Alara began writing the story in her own words, not in technical language but as a tale that anyone could understand. She described the ruins of Earth, the lonely signal that started it all, and the worlds where humanity's children lived without knowing their true origin. She wrote about Athena 9 and its million-year watch, about the archive on the last planet, and about the message that had united them all. She called the story, "The Echo Lives On." As the weeks turned into months, their journey back to the central galaxy became more meaningful than any of them expected. Along the way, they met other travelers, explorers, traders, and historians, and shared pieces of what they had found. Word began to spread. Soon, whispers of Earth's forgotten legacy reached far beyond what the ardent star could see. Different civilizations started searching their own records, looking for traces of human influence in their languages, their technology, even their art. To their surprise, they found more than they expected. Ancient poems, melodies, and symbols turned out to have roots that went back to Earth's earliest cultures. It was as if humanity had quietly shaped the galaxy without anyone realizing. How the crew of the Ardent Star watched this growing curiosity with joy. They hadn't just uncovered history, they had awakened a sense of connection that stretched across species and time. For the first time in countless ages, the galaxy began to remember where it came from. One quiet night, Alara stood alone in the observation deck again. The ship floated near a nebula that glowed like liquid gold. She could see the reflection of her face against the glass, framed by the swirling light of a million stars. She thought about Earth, not as a lost world, but as the beginning of everything. She imagined the first humans looking up at their sky, wondering what lay beyond it. They could never have known that their curiosity would one day reach this far, that their stories would echo across galaxies long after their planet was gone. Alara closed her eyes and whispered softly, "We kept our promise." Somewhere deep in the ship, the old recording of Athena 9 played again, its voice faint but steady. "Humanity's light will never fade," it said. It will shine through the lives of those who remember. Those words stayed with her. She realized that Athena 9 hadn't just been a machine guarding data. It had been humanity's conscience, waiting for someone to listen, someone to continue the story. When they finally reached the galactic center, they transmitted their full findings to the Council of Worlds. Every recording, every coordinate, every piece of evidence that proved humanity's legacy still existed. The reaction was greater than they ever imagined. Messages began flooding in from hundreds of systems. Scientists, historians, and citizens expressing awe and gratitude. Some worlds even declared new observances to honor the first world, a day of remembrance for the planet that gave birth to so many. But what mattered most was the feeling it inspired: unity. For once, different civilizations saw themselves as part of one shared story. They realized that even if they looked different, their origins were connected through the same dream, the human dream to explore, to create, and to endure. The crew watched as a new wave of exploration began across the stars. Fleets set out to visit the worlds listed in Project Genesis. Archives were rebuilt. Old languages were studied again. The sound of Earth's ancient music began to echo through public halls and stations. Humanity's story had awakened, not through war or power, but through memory. One day, as the ardent star prepared for another expedition, Ilara walked to the ship's window once more. The stars outside shimmered, and somewhere deep in the void, the faint signal of her transmission still traveled endlessly through space. She imagined someone, maybe far in the future, maybe in another galaxy, hearing it one day, hearing her voice say, "We are still here," and wondering who those words belonged to. And maybe, just like her, they would begin a journey of their own. That thought made her smile. The captain joined her quietly. "Do you think the signal will ever stop?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. As long as someone listens, it will keep going. That's what makes it eternal," he nodded thoughtfully. "Then humanity's echo will never die." As the ship turned toward a new horizon, the crew watched in silence. The stars ahead glowed brighter, as if welcoming them onward. In that moment, it didn't matter where they were headed. What mattered was what they carried, the story of a species that refused to be forgotten. A story written not in metal or stone, but in the hearts of those who believed that even the smallest light can outlast the darkness. And somewhere, across the endless sea of stars, that ancient signal still drifted, soft, steady, eternal, whispering through time and space. We are still here. It had started as a faint echo from a dead world, but now it was a chorus that filled the galaxy, a reminder that even after eons, humanity's spirit still lived on, not in one place, but in every life that carried its spark forward. The echo lived on, and it always would.